What's up, ghosts? So, over the course of this year, I've been trying to find my voice here on YouTube. And I've done a few different kinds of videos. I've got my deep dive videos, my reaction videos, on-site investigations, and now I've got my ghost story series where I share with you either true stories or stories that are believed to be true that are either strange, dark, paranormal, or mysterious in any way. And I'm having a blast. I'm having so much fun doing this channel, but I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys like to see from me the most? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, make sure to hit that like button. I want to get this video to 50 likes. I tried for 100 last video. I know that we can get 50 on this video with your help. That helps more than you think. Also, make sure to subscribe. And if you haven't already, make sure that notifications are turned on, all of them. And if you're so inclined, you can become a creepy shadow and help me out on Patreon. All right, let's get into it. There is something strange, and you might even say insidious, going on inside of our national parks. David Paulidas, former police detective and author of the Missing 411 series, makes this compelling case while highlighting some of the most incredible instances of people going missing in the US, specifically those who go missing in national parks. Obviously, people are going to go missing, given the fact that millions visit national parks every year. However, Paulidas focuses on a specific subset of those missing people. He recently spoke about the disappearance and seeming miraculous recovery of Holly Courtier, who was missing for 2 weeks in Zion's National Park just last month. And while this case is somewhat of a miracle, not everyone is so lucky. The facts involved in some of the strangest cases oftentimes defy logic. Sometimes search dogs will refuse to do their job. Other times children are found in astonishing areas, days or even weeks later, seemingly unscathed by the elements. Oftentimes, people will be recovered with little to no memory of what happened to them. And sometimes, bodies will never be found, seemingly having vanished into thin air. Paulidas documents his research in his book series Missing 411, and if you're interested, please visit his website and YouTube channel that I've linked in the description below. I am very interested in what might be going on here, and it's here in my series, The Moonlit Ghost Stories, that I plan on sharing with you some of the most incredible true stories that come out of his research. This is a story of 6-year-old Dennis Martin. Around May 31st, 1969, an underweight black bear was caught in a boar trap in the Smoky Mountains area and released, suggesting that during this time period it may have been more difficult than usual for one reason or another for wildlife to find food, causing them to act in ways they otherwise wouldn't. About 2 weeks later, on June 13th, Father's Day weekend, 6-year-old Dennis Martin, along with his father, William, grandfather Clyde, and 9-year-old older brother, Douglas, were spending the weekend camping out in the Smoky Mountains National Park. The family was familiar with the area, and it was their tradition to camp out in this area every year for Father's Day. They started their hike at Cades Cove Ranger Station and hiked 6 miles to Russell's Field, where they spent the night at a cabin. The next morning, from Russell's Field, they hiked to Spence Field, a popular campsite bisecting the famous Appalachian Trail, where they planned to set up camp, have some food, have some fun, and spend the night. The 4 of them were resting in a grassy field when another family, coincidentally named Martin as well, had children their age and asked if they could join Dennis and Douglas as they played. William said, of course, that's fine. Didn't see a problem with it. Dennis and Douglas and the 2 other children from the area, from the other Martin clan, started playing hide and seek. William, though, kept an eye on Dennis the entire time and saw him go behind a specific tree. while playing hide and seek. And eventually, all the children were done and they revealed themselves, and it was time to come out. And everyone did, that is, except for Dennis. William, thinking that Dennis was just being mischievous, called out, but there was no response. So he went to retrieve Dennis from behind the tree, which he knew he was behind because he watched him go behind that tree. But unbelievably, Dennis wasn't there. Around 3:30 p.m., it was clear Dennis was nowhere to be seen. Both Martin clans started scouring the area for Dennis. William frantically ran up the Appalachian Trail 2 miles, shouting for Dennis, but to no avail. He said he ran the trail as far as he thought it would be possible for Dennis on his own to go. Clyde took Douglas and began trekking back to Cadiz Cove to inform the ranger on duty. Over the next several hours, both Martin clans, rangers, other volunteers, including a scout group, would scour the entire area for Dennis, but would find absolutely nothing. About an hour after Dennis disappeared, Harold Key, another camper on an outing with his son, about 5 to 7 miles northwest from where Dennis went missing, in an area called Sea Branch Creek, heard a loud, sickening scream. Harold's son said, "Look, there's a bear." But when Harold looked, he said it wasn't a bear. It was a man, who, he said, was definitely trying to hide from them. At the time, Mr. Key didn't know anything about Dennis, but instinctively, he grabbed his son and went on his way. Hours later, around 8:30 p.m., heavy rainstorms started to roll in, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. The temperature that night would drop to 50 degrees, and things weren't looking good. By the next morning, one of the largest search parties in the history of the National Park Service was starting to take shape. Tony Stark, the regional chief of visitor protections, hired a helicopter pilot to fly in equipment and set up a base camp at Spence Field. 30 Boy Scouts in the area were contacted and they joined in on the search. 51 Ranger students, hundreds of National Park Service members, 2 Air Force helicopters joined in even, and 80 Special Forces Green Beret were called in from Fort Benning to assist in the search. And as the minutes turned to hours and the hours turned to days, efforts only expanded. Paulidas said in his book, Missing 411 Eastern United States, that it almost seemed like someone knew this would be a difficult case. And that's why an almost supernatural response from multiple agencies and hundreds of individuals responded so quickly. Early on, a searcher found tracks which they speculated belonged to Dennis. Those tracks meandered toward a creek where at that point the trail went cold. The prints showed that the child had one shoe on. The other foot was barefoot. However, they weren't sure at the time that this track did belong to Dennis. It was a possibility, but they didn't know. The next day, on June 16th, even more people and members of the Air National Guard were showing up in droves to help poor little Dennis. The total number of searchers ultimately reached around 1,400 individuals. And it was this day that the story had broken and public interest skyrocketed. It was at this time that Harold Key read about the missing boy in the newspaper, and he remembered that horrible scream. He immediately called authorities and shared what he had seen and heard, and the search continued, and the rains kept impeding the progress. 2 days later, one of Dennis's shoes and one sock was found. This confirmed that the tracks leading up to the stream were indeed Dennis's, and the search continued. 2 more days went by, and nothing was found. Days later, on the 24th, the National Park Service had a special meeting with FBI Special Agent Jim Reich, who had been assigned to this case, and the conditions of the search were evaluated. Still, Dennis was nowhere to be found. On June 26th, 1969, and 12 days into the search efforts were cut back, and volunteers were being sent home. The next day, on the 27th, however, federal troops were assigned to the case, and 2 boats from the Coast Guard were dispatched to search Fontana Lake, even though the lake was nearly 10 miles away from where Dennis had disappeared. On the 29th, the National Park Service, the FBI, and the Martins held a meeting to determine what direction the search should continue. It was said that the FBI couldn't continue their investigation any further unless it became clear there was evidence of foul play. So they pulled out of the search, but kept Jim Reich on the scene to monitor activities. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, there is evidence of foul play. Harold Key saw a man darting away from the scene and screaming in pain, trying to hide. He even contacted authorities as soon as he had heard about the missing boy. In one of the many unsettling facts about this case, the FBI refused his testimony. Harold even attempted to join the search, but was intercepted 20 miles away from the park. By who? Agent Jim Reich. And Harold was turned away. It was said that Reich had discounted Harold's story because at the time of the disappearance of Dennis, Harold was too far away when he heard the scream and saw the man darting behind the trees. Remember, Dennis disappeared around 3:30 p.m. at Spence Field, and Harold heard the scream about an hour later around 4:30 p.m. near Sea Branch Creek, near Cadiz Cove. This was about 5 to 8 miles away, depending upon if you went straight through the rugged terrain or took a trail. And it was determined that a child, even one abducted by an individual, could not have made this distance in the time allotted, and that decision was most likely made by Jim Reich. And the worst part is that they didn't even search the area, or at least for some reason the FBI didn't want anyone to know that they had. But there remains, to this day, no known record that they ever searched it. July 17th, the National Park Service received a letter from Harold Sherman, a psychic known at the time for the accuracy of his premonitions. The letter read, "I am impelled to ask you if you know whether or not there have been or are any questionable characters in the region, camping out in the wild in this area, like hermits or squatters. Such an individual might not be connected with the boy's disappearance at all, but I feel that a sex maniac, so-called, does exist in the vicinity and could have trailed the boy. I hesitate to write anymore as my conscious mind is trying to reject such a feeling. I see something red and something being carried or dragged. Are there any caves in the vicinity? A stream may even run through it, or part of it. I am always tormented when impressions come to my conscious mind, trying to tell me that they couldn't possibly be true, but I get a feeling of sudden panic on the part of Dennis. What happened to him occurred suddenly, unexpectedly, and he could not or did not scream out. He seems to be struck down by something. The area is rugged." It should be noted that Dennis was wearing a red shirt when he disappeared, and it's unclear if that information made it out to the public. September 14th, the search was officially closed down, and despite one of the largest searches in the history of the Park Service, only one shoe and one sock of Dennis was ever found, sometime in 1974. An unidentified ginseng hunter found the remains of a small child in Big Hollow, but never reported it for fear he'd suffer legal consequences for illegally harvesting ginseng in national parks. It wasn't until 11 years later, in 1985, that this man finally came forward. However, a follow-up search provided no insights. No new information ever came out until August 2011. David Paulidas interviewed William Martin, father of Dennis. It's at this time that William said that he spoke with Harold Key during the initial search, and Harold told William that he not only saw a man running and hiding through the brush, but that the hiding man was carrying something over his shoulder, and it very well could have been a child. William also made it clear in the interview that he thought it was obvious that the agent in charge of the search was intentionally suppressing information, and that the National Park Service search coordinator was merely, he said, a figurehead who was taking orders from someone else about how to proceed. Martin was convinced of this. It was someone from a different agency calling the shots, potentially Jim Reich. But the question remained, was it possible that someone carrying a child could make it from Spence Field to Sea Branch Creek through that rough and rugged terrain in about an hour's time? William said that he actually even made the trip with the National Park Service fire prevention officer in 90 minutes. It should be noted that William was then and still is very physically fit. William had something else on his mind, and he hesitated to bring it up at first. But he eventually spoke up and said that Jim Reich, an agent who had actually been in charge of overseeing other missing persons cases in the area at the time, at some point committed suicide. A couple months later, in October of 2011, Paulidas interviewed Dwight McCarter, retired National Park Service ranger from the Great Smokey Mountains area, and also the author of Lost, a ranger's journal of search and rescue. McCarter is one of the best trackers in North America. Paulidas asked him about Harold Key's testimony, and McCarter responded that he thought, however unlikely, it was possible for a physically fit individual to make the distance from Spence Field to Sea Branch Creek in the time allotted. He also, independent of William, made the trip to see specifically if it was possible, and he did it in about an hour's time. Paulidas then asked about why the Harold family thought at first they saw a bear, and then said it was a man. McCarter's response was incredible, and he hesitated to say anything at first, but eventually he did. And keep in mind that the following isn't some vague story on the internet. This isn't a creepypasta. This is from a retired ranger, arguably one of the best trackers in North America, and he said, there are wild men in the park. In fact, he knew of one specifically that wore a bear skin. But keep in mind that in that same interview, McCarter made it a point to specify that these wild men were actually human, but they were just wild, presumably born, bred, and grown, completely isolated from civilization and completely in the wild. Lastly, Paulidas was refused a Freedom of Information Act request for documents surrounding this case. And the question is, why? Why would the government, after 50-something years, what does the government have to hide surrounding this case? One of the largest searches in the history of the National Park Service, with over 1,400 individuals comprising multiple government agencies and military outfits, helicopters, boats, dogs, rangers, scouts, volunteers, and immense public interest over the course of weeks, found nothing more than a shoe and a sock. It's staggering to think that something like this is possible. It's nearly unbelievable, given the fact that it's William's testimony that he watched his son go behind the tree and then went to go retrieve him minutes later, and he was gone. And this forces you to wonder, is someone concealing information about Dennis? Does someone out there know what happened? Is there a report filed away somewhere in a corner of some government building with information about what actually happened to Dennis? We may never know. But this heartbreaking story serves as a stark reminder to not take your loved ones for granted. Because however unlikely you think it might be, in the blink of an eye, they could simply be gone. Hopefully, William, Clyde, and Douglas, and the rest of the Martin family has been able to find closure, and if not, hopefully they will. Thank you guys for watching this video and supporting me in this channel. I'm really experimenting with this video. I'm trying to find out what works best, and I'm still learning how to produce these videos. So just thank you guys for watching this and supporting me in this channel and this journey of the Moonlit Ghost. Please like and subscribe, and feel free to watch my other videos right here. And if you'd like your name at the end of each one of my videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Stay safe out there, ghosts, and most importantly, stay paranormal.